Okay, so historically, Hawaii had this predominantly Republican-run state, and how that kind of worked was the plantations and the Big Five were sort of taking hold of the workforce, the civilians, and they were kind of making all the rules. So there was this guy, John Burns, who was super unhappy about the working conditions in Hawaii because there, you know, most people were plantation workers, so they weren't getting fair pay, fair hours, all that stuff. So John Burns came together he tried to support the impoverished sugar plantation workers and restore the strength to the Democratic Party. Um, and so to do that, he brought this idea or he kind of formed this union called International Longshore and Warehouse Union, which was a way to promote plantation workers and a way to achieve solidarity with other workers and other unions for economic security and a peaceful world. So how he kind of did that was he formed this union and sent this guy Jack Hall over to Hawaii to sort of head it and to sort of go out and recruit people, recruit supporters within the like plantation workers of all sort of sides. Sorry, I have some notes I'm reading over here, just trying to collect all my thoughts. Um, so yeah, so Jack Hall, John Burns, and the Communist Party, which later on sort of led to people not really agreeing with them. But they worked together to empower the working class. And then excuse me. So then afterwards, when um, the the Hawaiian monarchy had sort of failed and the Republican Party came in, there was a lot of strikes from plantation workers and ethnic groups. Um, and there was a lot of rivals between people. So, like in the book, a lot of rivals between the Japanese and the Filipino camps. But then, so Jack Hall's main there's a lot of bugs. Jack Hall's main thing was to get these separate groups to come together to form one union to sort of fight these um, the Big Five and the plantation owners. Let's see what else is next. So then, what else do we have in that? So that's Jack Hall, ILWU. Oh, okay. So then, a lot of the plantation owners had kids. So the main character of the story, he was one of the kids, and so they were sort of born in this era that was a lot different. So they were born um, already having these relationships with other ethnic groups, so they didn't really feel that divide as much as their parents. So they were sort of like working and living side by side. A lot of them kind of got married, and they weren't really expressing these like strong rivalries. So then Jack Hall sort of he I think capitalized a lot on that and kind of targeted these younger workers and organized them to start going on all these strikes for better conditions and better pay. And then he was also after like the war broke up, he was able to like reconnect with these people and brought this GI Bill, which provides educational assistance for veterans of the war. So he brought that, and that allowed people to educate themselves and like run for office, get better paying jobs, so they have more say in their community, um, get out of like plantation working and like be someone for themselves, and also fight for their own people who didn't have the rights to do that. Um, let's see, what else do we have? So that's the GI Bill. Okay, so then after this, we were introduced to the House Un-American Activities Committee, which actually they promoted the Smith Act, which which makes it like illegal to basically it sets criminal penalties for advocating the overthrow of the U.S. government. And it required all non-citizen adults to register with the government. So you had to basically say that you're not a communist. And so that was a Smith Act, because there was a lot of sort of relationship between the communists and then this ILWU that Jack Hall wanted to do. But then you see in the book a lot of people, they say, like, hey, if I don't care if Jack Hall's a communist, he's fighting for better work conditions and all of this. So a lot of people actually started siding with him because they saw past this communist relationship and saw more of like what he was actually fighting for. But then a lot of people also going into that started to get scared of communist power taking over, which is what the Second Red Scare was, and which is what brought the Smith Act, because they were started to investigate like suspicious communist infiltrators, and they started to question like, hey, are you a communist? You have to sign the Smith Act to say that you're not. So John... sorry, let's see, what else? Oh, and then, yeah, so finally, the Democratic Revolution of 1954, that was when the Democratic Party really squashed the Republican Party, and they kind of won. So all of these people who were asked to sign it, so like Burns and Hall, they all had to say that they were loyal to the Democratic Party and not the Communist Party. But together, those two groups sort of were the ones who defeated the Republican Party and were able to make better working conditions and get better pay for the plantation workers. Okay, and then the next question. Discuss how these events affecting the characters in the novel. Well, all the characters in the novel, they grew up like, literally the name of the book is Plantation Boy. So like they all grew up in the plantation era and are workers there. And so you also see that divide between the parents and their sort of traditional outlook, and like you should stay on the plantation, you have to be here and work and support your family. But then you have all the kids or the nieces, I'm butchering that, I don't know how to say it, who don't want to work on the plantation anymore. They kind of use the war as their outlet, and then when they come back from war, they have the benefit of the GI Bill. They have this ILWU who has been formed to support them and to say like, hey, there are better options for you than the plantation. You don't need to go back to the plantation. Let's see, what else does it say? But it seems real life counterparts had all these events. So yeah, so then like you see, throughout the book, they don't think that they can ever get off the plantation, but then all of a sudden, the main character, he's starting to take these architecture classes, and he's fighting for better wages for him and his family, and then you see his progression from living like kind of a crappy life on the plantation to then forming into this life of self sort of he's self-supporting, and he supports for his family. A lot of that, he uses the GI Bill. He talks a lot about why wouldn't you use the GI Bill? Why would you waste this? So all of these things, that came together, people saw them as, or like the old people kind of saw them as these commies that, I guess that might not be politically correct to say that out loud, but the communists, whereas they're really just trying to support the plantation boys, and then so you can see that divide where the younger kids, or like the younger generation, they see that as sort of, oh, these people, they're here to support us as a way out, rather than staying here forever. And then consider his choice to write The Plantation Boy in the genre of historical fiction. What do we gain from I think writing this as historical fiction kind of allowed him to portray things in a way that makes sense to us, especially, we've been talking a lot about, like, writing in different ways, like his pidgin language and sort of the culture of Hawaii. Like, I know for me, it was hard for me to read this because some of the stuff I didn't really understand, but I know a lot of other people who are native here, they do understand it. So I think writing in a like a fictional way kind of allowed him to reach a broader audience. Also explain himself in a way that makes sense to people outside of the kind of immigrant community, or like the Japanese and Hawaiian community. Um, I also think it allows for sort of uh, for him to, I don't want to say like blow it out of proportion, or make it kind of more than what it was, but it kind of allows him to elaborate on things, um, that allows us to sort of to see what was going on in a way that makes sense. Um, but what might we lose? I think we also could lose a little bit of historical context. I think him not. I'm having a hard time putting this into words, but having him not 100% like use accurate information, it kind of we lose that like what really happened factor. Um, but I also think he kind of portrays the book in a way that it's not necessarily too far off from what really happened. He just sort of used fiction as a way to effectively get across his message and the point of the book. Um, yeah, so that wasn't the best explanation. I'm kind of having a hard time putting this, like putting my thoughts into words right now. But yeah, I think historical fiction in this sense works because this is a really hard, or I think this might be a difficult generation and difficult kind of chain of historical events to portray without sort of twisting the truth just a little bit. Yep.